There comes a moment in our lives when the soul whispers louder than the heart, a moment when we are called not to hold on, but to release, not because we no longer love, but because love itself demands transformation. Letting someone go is not just an emotional act, it is a spiritual event, a sacred initiation, one that takes place deep within the hidden chambers of our psyche, where the unseen currents of life move us toward becoming who we truly are. This is not about forgetting, it's about becoming, and what follows, though painful, is nothing short of alchemy. Let me take you through the 5 spiritual transformations that occur when you truly let someone go. There comes a moment in every human life when the scaffolding we have so carefully built begins to crack, not because it was faulty, but because it was never meant to last forever. This scaffolding, the roles we play, the relationships we clutch, the names we call ourselves, and the attachments we mistake for truth, is the architecture of the ego. The ego wants to keep us safe, to categorize our experiences, to claim dominion over chaos by labeling things as mine, yours. Good or bad, it thrives on control, but the soul asks for none of that. It asks for truth, for wholeness, for liberation. When we hold on to someone tightly, when our knuckles turn white with the effort of not losing them, what are we truly holding on to? Often it is not the person, not their breath or spirit or being. It is the part of us that came alive in their presence, the identity we constructed in relation to them, the comfort of a predictable rhythm. A story in which we knew our lines and our cues. That story may be familiar even when it hurts, even when it suffocates. The ego confuses familiarity with love, but love, true love, whether romantic, platonic, or divine, is not a thing to be captured. It is not meant to be caged or forced into a script. Love is wild. Love is wind over water, unpredictable, free, and unafraid. To let go of someone is not just to say goodbye to their presence in your life. It is to bury the version of yourself that was fused to them. It is to stand alone before the mirror, stripped of context, roles, or reference points. It is terrifying. It is also sacred. This is not a wound. It is a rite. It is the ego's funeral and the soul's first breath. There is no awakening without this death. The old self, so tightly stitched with threads of illusion and dependency, cannot carry the weight of what is real, and so it breaks. The breakdown is not a mistake. It is the alchemy that makes space for truth. Just as a snake must shed its skin to grow, so too must we shed the old layers of ourselves, the ones that were shaped more by fear than authenticity, more by survival than spirit. There is a woman I once knew who told her story not as a tale of heartbreak, but as one of resurrection. She had been in a relationship for years, one that chipped away at her essence until she could barely hear her own voice. It wasn't violent or loud. It was a quiet erasure, a slow dissolving of her joy. She stayed because the idea of being alone felt unbearable, but one night she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the eyes staring back. That was the moment her soul began to stir. Leaving him felt like dying, not because she loved him deeply, but because she had no idea who she was without him. For weeks she wandered the empty rooms of her new apartment like a ghost, and then one day she opened an old box from her childhood and found her watercolor paints. Her hands remembered what her heart had forgotten. She began to paint, furiously, hungrily, tearfully. What poured onto the canvas wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense. It was raw, unfiltered, honest. She was not painting pictures. She was painting her soul, and that is the sacred truth of these losses. They force us inward. They silence the noise just long enough for us to hear the quiet voice that had been waiting all along. It is the voice that whispers, "You are more than this role, more than this longing, more than the name they gave you." This awakening does not come in a blaze of glory. It comes in the slow, aching hours when you sit alone in your room, wondering what went wrong. It comes when your hands tremble as you delete their photos, when your chest aches as you pass by places you used to visit together. But if you sit with that ache, truly sit with it, without trying to numb it or outrun it, you will discover a strange miracle. The pain begins to change shape, it softens, and in its place something ancient begins to rise. This is your soul reclaiming its place. It does not arrive with trumpets or applause. It arrives in small moments. In the way you breathe deeper, in the quiet peace of solitude, in the rediscovery of your own passions, untouched by anyone else's expectations, you begin to feel whole, not because someone completed you, but because you remembered that you were never incomplete to begin with. We live in a world that teaches us to fear emptiness. We are taught to fill every silence, distract from every grief, escape every loss. But emptiness is not the enemy. It is the womb of rebirth. It is the space where illusions fall away and the real self is born. We must learn to sit in that emptiness and trust that something beautiful will grow there. This journey is not linear. There will be days when you miss them so much you can hardly breathe, days when the memory of their voice undoes you. Do not fight those days. Let them come, let them pass. You are not weak for grieving. You are courageous for choosing truth over comfort, and through it all, remember this, you are not here to stay the same. You are here to evolve, to awaken, to become who you were always meant to be before the world taught you who you should be. The soul does not awaken in comfort. It awakens in the fire, in the shedding. In the sacred unraveling, the people we lose are often our greatest teachers, not because of what they gave us, but because of what they left behind, a mirror, a lesson, a doorway. When we finally walk through that doorway, we step not into a new version of ourselves, but into the original self, the one that existed before the world told us who to be. And that self is powerful. That self is love. That self is the soul, unmasked, raw, and real. When we are asked to let go of a person, a dream, or even a version of ourselves, we are not simply closing a chapter. We are stepping into the forest, unarmed and uncertain, drawn by something deeper than logic or comfort. It is not a walk of ease, but one of necessity. The moment of letting go feels like an unraveling. We are pulled into the thick of our being, into the parts of us we have locked away. In this shadowy terrain, we do not find peace at first. We find pain. We find everything we've tried so desperately to outrun. This darkness, contrary to what we may believe, is not a punishment. It is not karma exacting revenge, nor the universe being unkind. It is an invitation, a summons from the soul to witness all that has been denied. Our fear of abandonment, our craving for approval, our loneliness, these are not stains to be scrubbed away. They are truths aching to be seen. They rise when the external comfort is stripped, when the person we loved walks away, when the dream shatters. And in that rupture, we are given a sacred chance to meet ourselves, naked and unfiltered. So many of us never truly see ourselves until the external world stops mirroring our illusion. A breakup, a betrayal, a loss. These are not ends but mirrors, and they reflect the shadow we've cloaked in silence. For years, perhaps, we've clung to relationships not out of love, but out of fear. We stayed because being alone threatened to reveal our inner emptiness. We performed, compromised, and quieted our truth, just to keep the illusion intact. But when that person leaves, or we finally gather the courage to walk away, the illusion dissolves, and what we're left with is the self, the raw, unedited self we have never dared to fully know. Imagine the countless people who, after a heartbreak, suddenly begin therapy, start journaling, or retreat into solitude. This is not a coincidence. It is a pattern as ancient as time itself, because heartbreak is not simply about another. It is a confrontation with ourselves. In losing someone, we are forced to ask, Who was I in their presence? Who was I pretending to be? What did I silence in order to be loved? These questions cut deep. They do not offer quick answers, but they guide us. They unearth the layers of protection we've built, layers that helped us survive, yes, but also kept us from truly living. The shadow is the part of us that has carried our unworthiness, our rage, our guilt, our shame. We push these parts down because we believed they made us unlovable, but healing begins when we stop banishing them, when we sit in their presence, not with judgment, but with curiosity. The descent into ourselves is not linear. It is messy and non-negotiable. Some days we feel liberated, other days we feel consumed. There are nights when the silence is deafening, when the absence feels like a hole in the soul. And yet, each of these moments is transformative. Because slowly, through grief, we begin to reclaim the parts we gave away. You see, healing is not about forgetting. It is not about replacing one pain with another distraction. It is about remembering who we were before we learned to be small. It is about retrieving the soul fragments we handed to others in exchange for love that never nourished us. It is about becoming whole, not by becoming perfect, but by integrating all that we are, especially the parts we once believed we had to hide. Letting go is an act of courage, not because of the release itself, but because of the darkness it reveals. But there is power in that darkness. In fact, there is truth, and truth, while it may burn, also sets us free. It teaches us that our wounds are not evidence of failure, but proof that we have lived, that we have loved, that we have dared to open our hearts even when it meant being hurt. There is a sacredness in sitting with our shadow. It humbles us. It reminds us that strength is not found in never falling, but in rising after we do. It shows us that the journey of becoming is not about arriving at some final destination where we are finally healed. No. It is about walking through the terrain of our soul again and again, meeting ourselves with more compassion each time. Many people search for light outside themselves. They chase relationships, achievements, and status, believing these will finally make them feel seen. But the truth is, the most profound recognition we will ever receive is the one we give ourselves. The moment we say, "I see you," to our own soul, not just the beautiful, polished parts, but the tired, the scared, the angry parts too. Letting go, then, is not an ending. It is a beginning. It is a rite of passage into selfhood, into authenticity, into a kind of love that does not depend on others to exist. A love that comes from within, that says, even here, even now, even like this, I am worthy. This journey is not reserved for the wise or the strong. It is for all of us. It begins the moment we stop blaming others for our pain and start asking what our pain is trying to teach us. It deepens when we stop avoiding solitude and start listening to the silence it brings. And it becomes transformative when we understand that every heartbreak, every ending, every descent into shadow is a call back home. You do not need to fear the dark forest. You need only to enter it. Because buried in that wilderness is your wholeness. And though the path may be winding and unclear, the one truth you can hold is this: you are not lost. You are becoming. There comes a moment in every life when the walls collapse, not with violence, but with a strange silence. It is the moment when what was once familiar has vanished, and yet nothing new has arrived to take its place. We find ourselves suspended in uncertainty, raw and emptied. It is in this sacred stillness that the soul begins its quiet whisper. There, in the void, a space is created, not of absence, but of possibility. We are trained to fear emptiness. We rush to fill it with distractions, noise, obligations, even relationships that no longer nourish us. The world teaches us that losing something means we have failed, that being empty means we are lacking. But nature does not agree. Nature abhors a vacuum, yes, but not with fear, with promise. She rushes in not with panic, but with life. Where there is space, there is room for creation. When we let go of a person, a dream, an identity, we are not merely losing, we are inviting the unknown to shape us anew. The soul requires this emptiness to grow. Just as a seed cannot flourish in crowded soil, our innermost potential cannot rise in a life too full of what no longer serves us. The act of letting go is not an act of defeat, it is an act of courage. A radical act of trust in what cannot yet be seen. We do not drop the old because we are certain of the new. We let go because we honor the deeper knowing that life cannot remain stagnant and that something greater waits beyond the horizon of our understanding. There is a spiritual name for this moment, the fertile void. It is not a desert, though it may feel barren. It is the womb, dark, enclosed, mysterious. It is the place from which all life emerges, shaped in silence and unseen transformation. In this space, the soul is neither who it once was, nor who it will become. It is becoming. There was once a man who found himself in this sacred space. After 10 years in a relationship that had defined his life, he walked away. Not into another love, not into another job, but into nothing. No direction, no identity, no assurance. The world might have seen him as lost, but in the depths of his uncertainty, something ancient stirred. He began to volunteer at a youth center, an act of survival, perhaps, or simply an act of doing something. Yet in that space, where he gave what little he had to offer, he found meaning. He listened to children who had no fathers, who carried grief they couldn't name. He recognized himself in their pain. Slowly, he stopped surviving and started serving. The brokenness that had threatened to consume him became the bridge through which he touched the lives of others. He became a counselor, not by design but by surrender. What had begun as a collapse became a calling. The life he had thought was ending had only just begun. This story is not rare. It lives in countless souls who have dared to release what they clung to, only to discover a deeper truth awaiting them. We often think transformation begins with a plan, but the most profound transformations begin with a letting go, with the courage to stand in emptiness and not rush to fill it. The ego resists this space fiercely. It wants to define, control, fix, and label. It fears the unknown because it cannot command it, but the soul moves differently. It speaks in symbols, dreams, longings. It understands that the unknown is not the enemy, but the cradle of all that is sacred. When we step back from trying to force life into our small containers, we allow life itself to show us what it longs to become through us. In the sacred space of surrender, life becomes personal and mythic all at once. We meet our deepest fears, and we find they are not monsters but messengers. We feel grief, and discover it carries the seeds of compassion. We touch despair, and it becomes the well of our empathy. In the fertile void, we are initiated into a deeper form of knowing, a wisdom that does not come from books or doctrines, but from lived experience. This initiation is not dramatic. It often comes quietly, wrapped in ordinary moments, a walk alone, a journal entry, a sleepless night, a conversation that lingers in the heart. Yet through these small cracks, the light returns. Slowly, gently, but surely, this is the paradox of true renewal. It often begins in what looks like ruin. We must allow the old story to burn down before the new one can be written, and that burning is never easy. It asks us to grieve, not only what we've lost, but what we thought we were supposed to be. It asks us to stand unclothed before the mystery, with no promises except the faith that something meaningful is gestating in the darkness. When we dare to remain in this space, without prematurely filling it, explaining it, or escaping it, we undergo a kind of soul alchemy. The very ground of who we are begins to shift. We no longer seek answers from the outside. We begin to trust the quiet movements within. We realize that clarity does not come from control, but from surrender. And then, often when we least expect it, something new arrives, a calling, a relationship. A vision, it doesn't enter with fanfare, but with a whisper. And because we have emptied ourselves, we are able to receive it fully. We are no longer full of the noise that once drowned our inner voice. We have made space for grace, for mystery, for life to surprise us. This sacred space is not a place of weakness. It is a place of strength, the strength to let go, the strength to wait, the strength to be shaped by forces we cannot yet understand. It is not a detour from life. It is life in its rawest, most transformative form. It is where the seed of who we are meant to be is planted, and when it blossoms, we are not the same. We are more honest, more humble, more alive, not because we conquered the void, but because we allowed it to change us. We come out not with answers, but with wisdom, not with certainty, but with faith, and not with a rigid identity, but with a deep and quiet purpose that can guide us, even through the next darkness. This is the power of sacred space. This is the gift of letting go, and this is how new life begins. There is a quiet but profound transformation that occurs when we begin to understand that those we love, those we lose, and even those who hurt us are more than just people in our lives. They are symbols, mirrors, and messengers of something far deeper. They are the outer manifestations of inner truths waiting to be realized. When we align with our inner archetype, we enter a sacred process, not of forgetting those who have shaped us, but of absorbing what they stood for. We are not abandoning their influence, we are reclaiming it. Life, at its deepest level, is symbolic. The people we are drawn to sometimes fiercely, sometimes painfully, are not accidents. They awaken parts of us that have long been sleeping. A lover may stir our capacity for deep connection, vulnerability, and passion. A teacher may awaken the hunger for wisdom, order, and self-discipline. A wound may open us to compassion, humility, and strength we never knew we had. These are not just people. These are roles that reflect our own psychological blueprint. And when these people leave, through time, distance, or death, it feels like we've lost a part of ourselves. But what we often fail to recognize is that their departure is the invitation. The void they leave behind is not a punishment, it is an initiation. In this initiation, we are not told to forget, we are not told to replace, we are told to embody. You don't just grieve their courage, you grow courageous. You don't just long for their comfort, you become the comforter. The process of letting go, then, is not about cutting ties. It is about weaving those symbolic qualities into the fabric of your being. This is where many falter, mistaking detachment for abandonment. But true letting go is not rejection. It is integration. To integrate is to absorb, to metabolize, to take what was once outside and make it an inseparable part of your identity. It is an act of reverence, not denial. It honors the essence of the other by allowing it to live on, within you. Consider the story of a young woman whose mother was the heart of her world. Her mother had been her safe place, her warmth, her guide. When she died, the daughter's world unraveled. She felt lost, untethered, as though the anchor of her existence had been ripped away. But over time, something remarkable happened. She began volunteering in her community, mentoring younger girls who had no one to turn to. Slowly, she became a source of nurturing, stability, and love for others. The very presence she had lost. I realized, she said, that I became the very nurturing presence I had lost. This was not the erasure of grief. It was its transformation. She had aligned with the archetype her mother represented and brought it to life in herself. This kind of transformation is available to all of us, but it requires courage. It requires facing the unbearable ache of loss, of absence, and asking not just why, but what now? What quality did that person awaken in me? What part of me came alive when I was with them? And how can I now cultivate that same aliveness from within? When you lose the friend who always believed in you, don't just mourn their faith. Become the one who believes in yourself. When you lose the mentor who gave you clarity, don't just long for their voice. become your own wise counsel. When the relationship ends and the warmth fades, don't just crave connection. Ignite that warmth inside your soul and radiate it into the world. This is not wishful thinking. This is psychological alchemy. This is how the soul evolves. Each symbolic figure in our life plays a sacred part in our evolution, but we are not meant to remain forever dependent on them. Just as the caterpillar cannot cling to the branch and also become the butterfly, we cannot cling to the external and also become whole. There comes a time when the imprint of the other must become the awakening of the self. This is how pain transforms. It is how longing finds purpose. The wound is not the end, it is the opening. It is through that gap, left by someone's absence, that we discover the depths of our own character. We are drawn inward not to collapse but to expand. The outer world recedes so that the inner world can rise. When you begin to align with your inner archetype, something ancient stirs within you, a kind of remembrance. You are not building yourself from scratch. You are uncovering what was always there, hidden beneath the noise and need for validation. The traits you admired in others were not foreign to you. They were reflections of your potential. Their presence was the mirror. Their departure is the calling. And so, the next time you feel the ache of someone no longer there, pause. Instead of reaching outward, reach inward. Ask yourself, what part of me did they awaken? What does this ache point toward within me? Then, with gentleness and determination, begin to nurture that part. Speak to it, honor it, let it grow. You are not a passive receiver of life. You are a vessel of transformation. You are the soil in which symbols take root and bloom into living qualities. No one is ever truly gone if you carry forward the essence they represented. No love is ever wasted if it deepens your own capacity to love. No lesson is ever lost if it becomes part of your wisdom. This is the path to empowerment, not through denial of loss, but through integration of meaning. This is how you move from grief to growth, from dependence to embodiment. You do not need to chase what you once received from others. You are meant to become it, and when you do, when you carry their courage, their insight, their warmth, not as memories but as living attributes, then you are truly free. Not because you let go of them, but because you realized they were always leading you back to yourself. There comes a time in each of our lives when the illusions we once clung to dissolve before our very eyes, when what we thought would complete us walks away or crumbles in our hands. At that moment, the ache we feel is not just of loss, but of something deeper, the shattering of the stories we told ourselves about who we were, who we needed, and what would finally make us whole. And yet in this very shattering lies the doorway to a deeper reality, one that has waited patiently within us all along. It is here, in the silence after the storm, that we begin to sense the stirrings of something ancient and eternal, the self that never left, never begged, never doubted. The self that simply is. The journey of letting go is not a gesture of defeat. It is not an abandonment of love or hope. It is a sacred surrender, a conscious turning inward, away from the endless reaching toward others to fill the hollow places inside us. We have been taught, through fairy tales, cultural mythologies, and our own longing, that another person can complete us, that if only we are loved in a certain way, or by a certain one, we will finally feel whole. And so we search, we grip, we sacrifice ourselves in the name of love, only to discover that no matter how tightly we hold, nothing external can ever truly fulfill the ache within. When a relationship ends, especially one that we believed was central to our identity, the pain can feel unbearable. It is not just the loss of a person, but the disintegration of a mirror in which we saw ourselves. But as we sit in the ruins, if we are willing to listen, not with the ears, but with the soul, we begin to hear another voice. A quieter one, not the loud inner critic that blames us for what went wrong, nor the frightened voice that begs us to fix what cannot be mended. This voice is different. It is older, wiser, It does not plead or persuade. It simply reminds you were never broken, you were never missing, you were always whole. The return to wholeness is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with lightning or fanfare. It happens slowly, like the morning light seeping through a window after a long, dark night. It begins in the small moments, when you choose to stay with your pain instead of numbing it, when you hear your own voice and trust it, when you look in the mirror and finally see someone worthy of love, not because another says so, but because you do. This is the quiet revolution of the soul. This is the moment when the sacred self begins to rise. There is a certain purity in the grief that comes with loss, for it strips us bare. In its rawness we meet the parts of ourselves we have long abandoned, the fearful child, the yearning heart, the silent wisdom. These aspects were never gone. We simply buried them under the noise of pleasing others, chasing dreams that were not ours, becoming who we thought we needed to be to earn love. Letting go unearths them. It brings them to the surface not to shame us, but to remind us, this is you, all of this, and it is enough. Think of the lotus. Its roots are deep in the mud, dark, cold, and thick. That mud is our pain, our confusion, the chaos of a life that didn't go according to plan. But from this mud, something sacred stirs. The stem begins to rise, pushing through murky waters, not yet knowing the sun exists, but instinctively drawn upward. That journey through the water is our growth, clumsy, uncertain, often invisible to others. And then, finally, the bloom, a fragile, radiant expression of everything that has come before, the return to self. The bloom is not separate from the mud, it is because of it. When we stop seeking wholeness in another, something beautiful happens. We start seeing others not as saviors or sources of validation, but as companions on the road. We can love more freely, more purely, not because we need someone to complete us, but because we choose to share our already complete selves. We stop performing, stop contorting. We begin to show up as we are with all our scars and softness and say, this is me, and I am enough. This is not to say the pain vanishes, it doesn't, but it transforms. It becomes a teacher instead of a tormentor. Each tear becomes sacred. Each heartbreak becomes a chapter in the story of our becoming. And slowly, without realizing it, we start to gather the scattered pieces of ourselves. Not to glue them back the way they were, but to recognize that perhaps we were never meant to be perfect, never meant to be complete in the way we once imagined. Our wholeness is not a state of perfection, but a state of presence. It is the acceptance of all that we are, light and shadow, joy and grief, hope and heartbreak. In a world that profits from our self-doubt, this return to self is a quiet act of rebellion. It is a reclaiming of power. When we stop waiting for someone else to see our worth and begin to see it ourselves, we become unstoppable, not in a grand external sense, but in the truest sense, unshaken, rooted, alive. So if you are in the mud right now, if your heart is heavy, your eyes weary, your soul aching, know this, the bloom is coming, not because you force it, but because it is your nature. You were made to rise. You were made to remember, and in that remembering, you will find not the person you used to be, but the one who was always there beneath it all, the one who never needed saving, the one who was always whole. So when you let someone go, you are not breaking. You are awakening, not losing, but transmuting. This is a spiritual metamorphosis. You may grieve, yes, you may ache, but something within you is aligning, blossoming, and becoming. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is what love was meant to teach you all along. Thank you. Would you like this formatted as a video script, turned into a voiceover, or translated into another language?